I'm Sarah Russell.
I'm JQ Walker.
I'm Hind, and we are
The Neurodivergent Report, a research-based podcast by and for neurodivergent brains.
In each episode, we'll explore topics relating to neurodiversity and coping strategies by reviewing the literature and discussing current topics.
We will also have interview episodes where we sit down with experts in the field and listeners like you, with the hope that together we can all learn to heal in community.
However you are able to engage, thank you for being here. Hello, I'm Sarah Russell, host of the Neurodivergent Report, and I am so excited to be talking to Dave Delaney today, keynote speaker, coach, host of the ADHD Wise Squirrels podcast. I heard he was enlightening, empowering, and entertaining, so I wanted to see for myself. Dave, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Sarah. It's great to be here.
Awesome. And today also I have JQ.
Hello. Also
Hey.
here once again.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Dave, who are you? What do you do for work? A lot.
Yeah, a lot. Primarily what I do is a lot of keynote presentations, training, communication strategy, and coaching. Everything I do lives under this kind of umbrella of communication, whether it's like I studied improv with Second City and I do some training on comedy and performance and some acting and things like that. So there's that side of communication. There's keynote presentations and speaking to audiences and interacting with groups. And I love that. There's the digital side of like being a content creator, writer. I'm a published author. I started podcasting 20 years ago.
What?
Yeah. My first podcast was October 2005. So,
Where were you? What was it called?
It was called Two Boobs and a Baby. And it was a parenting podcast. And
recently had a kid then.
Yeah. So we were pregnant with our first kiddo and subsequently got pregnant again during the podcast with our second. They're 11 and a half months apart. And so, we started a podcast because my wife is from Tennessee, where we live in Nashville, and I'm from Toronto, where we used to live for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And we met in Ireland. So we've lived abroad in a lot of different places. And so we wanted a way to kind of create sort of an audio baby book in a sense to kind of share, how things are going with us, with all our friends around the world and family. And so I was already listening to podcasts in 2004. And so then decided, let's start a podcast about this. And we're idiots with parenting. And so boobs seemed like a logical name for us, and Two Boobs and a Baby. And then it became Two Boobs and a Baby Plus. And so, so that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That's beautiful. Also, you got to weave in like so many things. Like I asked about work and then you brought in your family, and that's beautiful. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, all right. So another thing, now you have an ADHD podcast and you do a lot of work sort of in the ADHD sphere, but that's relatively new for you. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I was diagnosed like 2 years ago at 50. And so,
Wow.
yeah, that's a story unto itself. Yeah. But being a veteran podcaster and kind of a Web 2.0 type person, I decided to start a blog and a website and a podcast all about it to kind of share my experiences to help remove stigmas and sort of educate people and really to encourage them to go and get tested, if they feel that they could have ADHD. I've learned a ton during that time. And people have started hiring me, listeners have started hiring me as a coach, with full disclosure that I'm not an ADHD coach per se. And I'm also not a doctor, nor do I pretend I'm one on the internet like many others. So I'm careful with that, but I've learned a ton. And so, that kind of led to starting the podcast.
Lived experience really can be a powerful teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering too, because you said that you're encouraging people to get tested if they're thinking that could be them. And I'm wondering what that kind of journey was like for you.
Yeah. Well, there's a long version of the story and a short version. The medium version was that I was diagnosed in 2015 or 16. I don't know. And somehow I missed the memo. Yeah. And I'm not sure if there was a memo. But either way, I did not know after that, going to see a therapist, like a psychiatrist twice for the purpose of diagnosing ADHD, if that was the case, because my wife being a school teacher was like, you have ADHD. For whatever reason, I somehow missed that memo. And then in 2022 or three, it's all a blur. I was so I work for myself and have worked for myself for about 13 years. And I was in a mastermind type group with a couple other entrepreneurs, and one I know very well, and the other guy I didn't know at all. And as I got to know him, or he got to know me over a few months, he texted me out of the blue one day and says, "Dave, do you have ADHD?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Yes, you
Well,
do.
I think you do.
I think you
Yeah.
do." Yeah, because he had ADHD. And
Yep.
so he said, go talk to your doctor.
Yeah.
And so I did, and then got diagnosed and started getting treatment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder about like your childhood just a little bit. Like, did everybody just accept, like, did you do sports or have some sort of an outlet for that very like obvious ADHD presentation?
For me, it was drinking and smoking and skateboarding and
Right on.
yeah. So those were like those were my
Yeah,
main
yeah.
outlets.
Also, not the first time I've heard that story.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I actually had somebody on Squirrels who was also like former punk rocker, and we were talking about ADHD and the sort of punk rock community and things, because that was very much
Some overlap.
both of our paths.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, as a kid, it was more, I was very creative. I was totally like the stereotypical ADHD presentation of, highly hyperactive. So I was the Bart Simpson, as I like to say.
Yeah. Very
much-
lovable, I bet.
Lovable. Yeah. Yeah. You could say that. Yeah. Lovable, as each teacher would just graduate me to the next class so they wouldn't have to deal with me again. So lovable that way, in retrospect, perhaps.
Oh.
But yeah, so yeah, I was always kind of outgoing, and I loved acting and comedy and things like that. But yeah, it took that was sort of the childhood there.
Yeah. Okay. Normally we start to see people get diagnosed in adulthood if they sort of have like a big life transition, or maybe
Mhm.
they start having lots of symptoms all of a sudden.
Mhm.
Is any of that sort of like, were you in the middle of like a transition? Obviously your kids were older by then, so maybe they got diagnosed.
Yeah, for me,
Sorry. Or like maybe you just, I don't know, like got triple booked one day and we're like,
yeah.
oh man, maybe I need to like look at this more.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really was that entrepreneur friend who was like, he's like, "You probably have ADHD. You should go see your doctor." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, let me go do that."
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, when you work for yourself, entrepreneurship is very much a rocky road and a roller coaster, and there's highs and lows. And over the last couple of years, there's been more lows than highs, I guess. And that was causing stress and anxiety. And so, yeah, it was kind of a combination of like the anxiety, because during 2020, when the world was imploding, um, uh, in addition to all that, we had a tornado come through Nashville, which destroyed my kid's school. And then 3 months after that, another storm came through and put 10 holes in our roof. And at that point, we were kind of out of our house for 3 months. And my full-time job as a speaker, when there was a pandemic, quickly dried up. And suddenly my full-time job was managing shady contractors and insurance claims during a
Mhm.
pandemic. And so that was an extremely stressful period. In
Logistically
addition,
challenging time.
yeah, in addition to all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like everything else going on in the world. So
There's economic instability. Like there's a lot. There's a lot.
yeah, 2020 was a hell of a year. So, I did a few things. Like I cut out social media for the summer. I cut out any news for the most part for the summer, or for like a month or two. I just stopped paying attention because it was just causing me too much stress. I
Yeah.
quit drinking in 2020, so I haven't had a drink in nearly 5 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So I did like I started a mindfulness and meditation practice that I've always dabbled
Ooh,
with
my
it.
favorite.
Yeah. I've always dabbled with it here and there, but I actually
Yeah.
started taking it much more seriously, and still have a daily practice, and started journaling more as I used to do. And so I started doing like my dad during that period passed away from dementia and Alzheimer's. And one of the things with that is I was trying to research how not to get dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And not that it's, there's not an exact way not to do it, but there's certainly ways to try not to get that. And
Mhm.
alcohol and eating like crap and lack of exercise and stress. Another thing is sleep apnea, which I went and got a sleep test. And sure enough, I have sleep apnea. So I started doing all these things to help reduce the odds of getting dementia and Alzheimer's while also hoping to survive a pandemic. Um, and and the stress with everything else. And in doing all that, once I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple years later, you know, I was thankful because a lot of the
Yeah.
things that I was doing would be helpful given now this new knowledge of my operating system, as I like to
Mhm.
say.
Uh-huh.
That's so funny because I say the same thing usually with operating systems, like,
Mm,
like
yeah,
Mac versus Windows and finding, the programs that work best for you. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Something that I'm kind of wondering, and I'm sorry if you already touched on this, but the transition from working, you said like for Google, and then transitioning to just working for yourself. Is that correct?
Well, I was working for myself and Google was a client. So Google
Okay.
hired me to represent them. So they were a client. They
Google
weren't,
Gotcha.
loves freelancers.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No
So
benefits.
yeah, yeah.
But
Sorry.
I'm wondering, like, so what was your career like before that? Were you always it doesn't sound like you were always working for yourself, and I'm wondering like what that
But it
transition
does
was like.
sound like it was always a bit unconventional.
Yeah, yeah, but I
Yeah.
want to hear more about
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah. So my career started like I worked tons of odd jobs as a
Mhm.
kid, getting up to started working at bars and restaurants and love that. And then from there, started taking my career somewhat seriously and realized being a server isn't going to really be a great way to support my family and all that stuff long term anyway. So with all due
Yeah.
respect to the servers out there, because
Yeah.
I love the business. So I started like the journey was working for like a theater company in promotions and publicity, a small theater company. That evolved to me being the marketing manager of the Toronto production of Hairspray, the John Waters musical. So
Yeah.
that was my show. And then I worked on The Lion King and some others like during that period. From there, I started a great relationship, and all these roles were sort of in the marketing kind of space. Uh, Started working for a newspaper in Toronto as a promotions executive. And then from there, worked for a television network in sort of communications, promotion strategy stuff. And then I moved south from Toronto to Nashville. I started kind of working in the tech space quite a lot more.
Yeah.
And then went out on my own after my book came out in whatever year that was, 2011, I think, and started doing digital marketing coaching to teach like small business owners how to grow their businesses with digital. And then got invited to start speaking here and there and found a real love for delivering keynote presentations and trainings and workshops. So started doing that much more. And then a colleague reached out and said, "Hey, are you still doing a lot of speaking and workshops?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Are you still like, aware enough of digital SEO, SEM and all that
Mhm.
content marketing stuff?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Do you want to be a speaker for Google?" I said, "Yeah." And so for about 6 years, I would travel on Google's behalf and kind of represent Google speaking on their behalf at events, big and small. Yeah. And so while I was doing the Google stuff, I was still doing my own keynote presentations and training. Then, yeah. And then Google kind of wound things down, or no, kind of abruptly ended at no
Mm.
fault of my own, but it was just kind of, yeah, it was
Yeah.
just the program was ended.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then just continued doing keynote presentations and workshops. And then when I started Why Squirrels, I found listeners started reaching out saying, "Hey, I know you're not an ADHD coach by like certificate or whatever, but could you help coach me on some business problems and stuff?" And so I started doing that more, which I find the most rewarding because I love helping fellow wise squirrels.
Yeah.
So
That kind of direct, like, because I mean, you're speaking to crowds, and I'm sure helping people with wisdom in that way, but then now you
yeah,
get to actually work one-on-one with someone, like, you see the direct impact of the work that you're doing.
yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah, I love
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned wise squirrels.
Yeah.
Um, just again, that's your podcast. You sort of run that weekly?
No, it's biweekly, so it's
Okay.
twice a month. Like it's every 2 weeks, basically. Biweekly and bi-monthly is such a confusing term because
Yeah,
it's
because
Yeah.
people use it differently.
yeah,
Sometimes
and there's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because I started using biweekly, and I'm like, wait,
Is
that's
that
not
twice a
twice a week.
week?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I started researching the definition, and it's like yeah, it's a totally confusing term. But
Yeah.
anyway, so no, I do it an episode every
Okay.
2 weeks. So a lot of the podcasts I've done in the past were weekly, but I approached Why Squirrels understanding that I still have a day job and I'm
Yeah.
still it started really as a passion project and has evolved into a bit of a mission for me now. So I would like to switch to weekly would be great, but it's not at the level it needs to be before doing that. So right now it's
Mhm.
still every 2 weeks.
I get that. Yeah. I mean, this is very much also a passion project, but it's kind of a continuation of the work I was already doing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, just in a different space now.
What was the work you were already doing?
So I was the producer for the ADHD Skills Lab, which is
Okay.
a different podcast. And
I
so
feel
when
like,
that
Sarah, you're not
project,
giving yourself enough credit.
I studied radio and television broadcasting before going back to school for marketing and
Mm.
business. And yeah, so my podcast, like I do everything myself, which is probably not a good thing considering there's only 24 hours in a day, but
Mhm.
I love the process of editing, especially editing audio and seeing all my ums and ahs. Like I can identify them in a waveform
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I
I
view it
Yeah.
like composing.
Yeah. Yeah.
mm.
Totally. Yeah. What about you, Jay?
Well, I was gonna say, like, I also do voiceover work,
Oh,
so
nice.
very familiar with having to edit out things.
Yeah. With your podcasting background or do you, or
Yeah.
is this,
Well,
yeah.
this is podcast numero uno for me. So
Nice.
Debut.
Yeah.
debut, yeah. So
Oh,
Sarah
great.
and I met because I worked at the same company that she did as an ADHD coach. I have a background
Mhm.
in like psychology and psychology research and so like also some social anxiety coaching. But I for the past 2 or 3 years have been basically just freelancing and just
Yep.
doing random contract jobs, including voiceover. That's a big chunk of what I do now.
That's
But
awesome. That's
yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I love it.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's
we
kind
all.
of why
It's funny how much we all do, like
yeah,
separate.
you said it like at one time, like ADHD brains contain multitudes, and
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah.
commonly
Yeah.
do.
So true.
Yeah, I think the key thing is like, so my next book that I'm working on right now is called The Root Down, tentatively at least. And I have a new keynote presentation I'm doing on that. And I'm doing a webinar soon that kind of leads into it a little about late diagnosis with
Yeah.
ADHD and
Did you say root down?
Root Down. Yeah, like the Beastie Boys song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. But nothing to do with the song. It just
Just happens to be.
well, I started thinking, so I developed the Root Down as a keynote presentation and it follows sort of a forest motif, a lot of trees, roots,
Yeah.
wisdom, things like that. Why squirrels, a lot of squirrels in the forest. So
I
it all
see
sort
it.
of
Oh.
I see the
connected.
vision.
Yeah. So, but I was going to say the Root Down, like the presentation, the training, the coaching, the book ultimately it's about knowing yourself, respecting yourself and connecting yourself. And the idea is to better know yourself, your strengths, your operating system, as it were. And then accepting yourself. And that means self-love, self-respect. And then I have strategies for each part. And then the last part is connecting yourself, meaning finding your community, finding your people, because, we're in a loneliness epidemic and
Mhm.
it's important that we get out, and especially in this upcoming sort of world of AI and bots and things. I mean, it won't be long before for me, it already is now, where unless you know the person specifically, like personally, there's no way to know whether you're conversing with a bot on social media now or not. So
Yeah.
it's like, well, what's the point? I'd rather just meet people in person and,
Yeah.
high fives, handshakes, hugs,
All that
that kind
good
of thing.
stuff. Sometimes when you see like a comment on something that's it's from Pete 0384. It's like maybe
Yeah.
that's Pete's birth month and birth year, but do we really
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Why is Pete so
yeah.
vitriol? Like why is he filled with the hate?
Yeah.
I mean, Pete, take a chill pill.
Yeah, Pete,
Yeah.
calm down. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's so tough
Yeah.
because I know the digital space is so like it makes everything so much more accessible for neurodivergence. And so on one hand, I like really want to still advocate for like digital stuff. But then on the other hand, like if we continue to retreat from society and they no longer see us in society, then like we don't need to build ramps because there's nobody in wheelchairs here. Well,
Right.
there's
Right.
nobody
Yeah.
in
Right.
wheelchairs here because you don't have any ramps.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
Well,
So
a lot
I
of, like,
just worry
yeah.
about the all or nothing thing. I mean, that's just so ADHD.
But yeah, companies, more and more companies are hiring neurodivergent teams and specifically because
Mm.
they understand, especially tech companies. I know like
Mhm.
Microsoft and IBM and Google as well do that because they know, like, and without generalizing, but let's say a lot of developers are possibly, ADHDers or neurodivergent. So like
Yeah.
they just want to solve problems, hammer code, have headphones, listen to tunes all day, and
Which
that's
sounds
their happy
amazing.
place, which is great. Yeah, which is great. So I think it's it's the purpose of like understanding people's strengths and then hiring based on strengths rather than
Yeah.
like personality
And
quirks.
it sounds like your book again is going to be like a great resource touching on just that. And it's a lot of like what we try to talk about on this podcast too, like lowering stigma so that you can come to terms with the brain that you have,
Mhm.
understanding yourself to know what your strengths are, and then applying it, and then exactly what you were saying, like finding that circle of people who love your brain for what your brain is, and they're here for all of it, you know?
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, we need to feel accepted in order to feel like we have a place, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And to
yeah,
safe.
for sure. Yeah,
Feel
and
safe.
honestly, as it pertains to the root down, like the way I've developed this, it's for like any neurotype audience. It doesn't really matter, like because I believe that like loneliness is an epidemic regardless of your neurotype, right?
Yeah.
And same with
Yes.
not knowing yourself and not accepting yourself. These things apply to everybody.
Mhm.
But the presentation follows sort of the storyline of my late diagnosis. And so part of my Spidey secret of the presentation is also to educate audiences about ADHD so that
Mm.
ultimately those in the audience who may identify with what I'm describing may go and I have a link to a test at whysquirrels.com. But of course, it's like an online test. I still say, and I don't see the results, but I still say, like, obviously it's a good starting point, but go see your doctor first,
Mhm.
obviously. And I have a whole thing about that. But I was going to say, yeah. So part of the root down is really to educate people and to remove stigmas and to encourage people to go and get tested if they feel that they could have ADHD, because with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, you're 13 up to 13 years, or your life can be up to 13 years less,
Yeah.
right? Your
That
life
was
expectancy.
yeah, there was a study, and I think it might be the same one. It was coming out recently and was like
Yeah.
getting shared around a lot. And yeah, just with the life expectancy being less. And it was for a lot of different reasons. Like they were saying one is just impulsivity, but then also having untreated ADHD could lead to untreated comorbidities and then
Yes.
having higher rates of potentially self-harm and suicide. Like, ah,
Not to mention a lot of the lifestyle choices that we make will
yes.
contribute to like the higher risk of disease later on as well. So
Mhm.
like it really just makes a huge case for like seeking whatever kind of support like will work for you.
Yeah. And just that self-knowledge of knowing, like, the journey I've been on is fascinating because like there's like one example is um so like I said, I don't drink anymore. When I was younger, I would drink a lot hanging out with friends, and I would like knock back one after the other beer. Or when I smoked cigarettes a million years ago, I would like smoke a whole pack without thinking twice about it.
Mhm.
I'd just chain smoke. But you know, f- fast forward to being older and having kids, I quit smoking a million years ago, and I was responsible with my drinking as I got older. But we'd go out to eat, and I have a son and a daughter, and I would drive them crazy because I have this crazy appetite, and I would eat all my food. Then I would eat my wife's leftovers. Then I would eat my son's leftovers, and then my daughter's. And so all the plates were cleaned because I would just eat it all. And the reason my dad wouldn't let me leave the table without finishing my food as a kid, and
Mm.
my mom grew up, in London during the war back in the day. So she was very like adamant about finishing your food kind of
Mhm.
thing, being thankful for it. So I always blamed their parenting. But what I didn't realize was it's this excessiveness that comes with ADHD that does account for part of your lifespan being shortened because of
Mm,
alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, and all that. But it also, diabetes or
Yeah.
being obese and things like that. So this excessive eating thing, I was like, I had no idea. I'm like, I am full. Nom, nom. I'm like Homer Simpson or something. And so like learning that, and so as I learn these things, I'm like, okay, so it's the ADHD that's causing me to be excessive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just for people listening, just to clarify then, are you saying that you think that that's, or because I'm not super familiar with this, so are you saying that that's probably because, dopamine, food tastes good, we keep eating food kind of?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again,
Yeah.
and I always say, like, I'm not a doctor and don't play
Yeah,
one
no,
on the
but
internet, but it's Russell Barkley who talked about the 13-year life expectancy, and he's sort of like the main person I follow with the
yes.
ADHD stuff, and he's
Yeah.
yeah.
He was
Um,
my first sort of dive into ADHD as well.
yeah, he's great. Yeah. And so like at ysquirrels.com/life, that's where I included his information about the life expectancy statistic.
Mm,
But yeah, I think it's yeah, this addictive way. It's like you're getting
We struggle
dopamine,
with
you're getting all,
moderation.
yeah.
yeah,
We
yeah,
struggle to regulate our emotions. We struggle to regulate everything.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I also have always been like a binge eater,
Hmm.
especially for sugar. And
Yeah.
I thought when I was younger, like, oh gosh, does that mean I have like an eating disorder and this and that? But um, yeah, now it's really just like, oh, I'm bored.
Yeah. Right,
I
right,
need
right.
to go do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I love that. So I wanted to ask you a million years ago about how you keep up with meditation daily.
Mm.
Do you have like a few different practices that you cycle through based on how much time you
Yeah, I use a couple apps
have? Okay,
that
cool.
have guided meditations. So
Hmm.
I like Sam Harris's work a lot and his Making Sense podcast. So he also has a Waking Up app. It's called the Waking Up app. And so that's a really good one. He has a daily 10-minute or 20-minute, but he has a lot of great teachers within the app. So it's well done. He has a cool model too, because it's not cheap, but he also has a model that if you can't afford it, he'll give it to you for free, and you just have
Mm,
to email their support and ask for it for free. So
That's awesome.
that's my favorite one. I've dabbled with others like Headspace, which I like, and there's a couple others. And then I've been using over the last year or so.
yeah. I have an immediate question because um I used to work, well, I mean, I was volunteering, but I
Yeah,
was contributing to a lab at Brown that focused on mindfulness. And
yeah,
our whole thing was we were looking at cultural adaptations for mindfulness. And even though ADHD was not a population, that was like a culture that we were looking at, it got me really interested in research about how do you make mindfulness like a something that people with ADHD can maintain. And I don't know if
mm,
that's been a personal struggle for you. I don't know if that's been something that you've heard of, but I'm wondering if you have any kind of insight to share on that.
yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, like it starts with meditation, and there's different types of meditation, and one category of meditation is mindfulness,
Mhm.
right?
Hmm.
And that's the one Diana Winston teaches, and a lot of the most common sort of Western meditation is mindful meditation. So um the more that you do it, the more mindful you become. Right, because you're practicing slowing down, and whether you do it for a minute or 5 minutes or whatever, you're really teaching yourself to slow down and to be
Yeah.
mindful in the moment rather than mindless in the moment, right?
Mm,
And so what happens then is, and I'm not perfect with it by any means, and I'm not mindful all the time by any means, but um, you start doing things like just the other day, I was washing my hands
Yeah.
in soapy water in my bathroom, and I'm like, started feeling the warmth of the water as I was washing my
Hmm.
hands. And this wasn't me washing my hands any longer. And it wasn't me like, whoa, the water feels so nice. But for a minute, I was just
yeah.
thinking about like, this feels great. And also how thankful I am that we have hot water
Yeah.
running out of our taps.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the best tips I've heard is that as you're sitting and you're focusing on your breath, let's say, you're going to start thinking of things, right? Because that's what your brain does, regardless of your neurotype, and it's not a bad thing to be thinking of things necessarily, right? But the idea is to just recognize those thoughts. And so one tip I got that I love and I've advised people on a lot, which is, and this is part of the root down too, because I talk about meditation in it, is if you let's say you envision, like what's something that you would just what's something that would pop up in your head randomly?
Like I have to do something later today, you know?
Yeah. What would
Yeah.
be the thing that you have to do?
Oh, I have to switch the washer to the dryer.
Okay. So
Real example.
Okay. So you're sitting meditating and you're focusing on your breath and you're thinking about focusing on your breath. And then you're like, crap, I got to do the dryer and the washer later. And I got to do that. And as you start thinking about that, envision you doing it like a little short film. Right. And so what happens is you think, okay, I've got to go to the room with the washer dryer and I've got to lift up one of them and drag it out. And then I've got to lift up the other one and drag that out and probably have to unplug one and move it over and get the other one in. And then I've got probably should vacuum back there because it's probably going to be gross. And then I got to get the other one and then kind of move it back in. And then I got to plug it in and then you're done. Right. And so the idea is if you play this as a little movie in your head, it ends. You're like, oh, well, there's nothing else to do. Now I've done it. Right. And this whole process of thinking this through is seconds. It's not minutes. Right. It's seconds. Yeah. It's and you think about it like a short film and then the film's over and then you return to your breath. So it's like you give yourself permission to just think through the thing and then like a short film and then just let it end. Right. And then maybe you get back to your breath, you start focusing on your breath again. And then you start thinking, oh, I've got that pile of laundry. Well, okay. Now I got to do the laundry and think, okay, I put it in, put the soap in, turn it on, and away I go back to the breath. And so this really does help, I find, in staying focused on it.
I think I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's do a little recap. Root down. When can we expect that? Do you know?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that.
That's okay.
Well, it's one of those things that's like,
I'll be your accountability buddy.
Yeah. Do some body doubling, like body doubling writing sessions.
Yeah.
I keep starting and pausing. And I think it's just balancing. I'm juggling too many plates and spinning too many cats. So
I feel you.
I need to get back at it. One of the struggles too, and ADHD, I mean, it's very much it's like a lot of times with ADHD, as you know, you tend to leave things to the last minute, but then you knock it out of the park.
Right.
And you whatever, you crush it. But
there is no last minute.
Well, that's the kicker, right? So like my first book, New Business Networking, I had a publisher, like a traditional Pearson was my publisher. So they gave me an advance. I had a contract legally, a standing. So I had deliverable dates to deliver each like group of chapters. So, I had that sort of gun to my head, if you will.
Right.
And I don't for this. So, and it's been, so what I'm kicking around the idea of kicking it, of literally putting it on Kickstarter and seeing if the community will support me, because if my listeners,
if there's excitement, you're gonna like hop on that wave,
or feel like that there's, because I was actually thinking, I was like, you could try maybe make an announcement on your podcast or something, because if you have people that even I feel like if one person comments like, oh my gosh, so excited for blah 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 date, then you're like, oh man, I gotta get this done.
Yeah, and I've had good feedback from people about it. I've just gotta knock it out. So I've been thinking about putting it on, whether it's Kickstarter or Indiegogo or something like that. So
that's a really interesting idea.
Well, it's a couple fold, right? Like part of it is obviously the accountability piece, right? So now people have invested in it, but that's the other side of it too, that I've thought about, is that if people don't buy it, then I'm like, okay, then why am I writing this book? Right. Because if I can't sell it to my own listeners and my own community, then that's a good sign that maybe this is not a good idea after all. So I just need to add it to my list of things to do as I look down at all of my Post-it notes. And
you're just gonna start getting emails from me asking about it.
Yeah. Do it. Yeah. Where's the book? Yeah, for sure.
No, because while you were talking about it, I think that self-acceptance piece is so important, but
Hmm.
that's like the journey of 1,000 miles,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it sort of like changes and all that. It feels very much like there's a whole like identity reconstruction conversation in that stage.
Yeah. I think the first
Maybe a
stage is
little bit
really,
of grieving.
yeah. I mean, the first stage is knowing yourself, right? So that's the stage of identifying your strengths,
Mm,
and I have a bunch of different, assessments and things that you can do for that. It's also for, those who don't know if they have ADHD to get tested and see if they do, right? If
yeah.
that's, something you want to do. So knowing yourself really gets into like understanding your strengths and weaknesses and your operating system, as we said. Once you do that, then the second section is accepting yourself and respecting yourself, right? And that means getting into more mindfulness and meditation and journaling and then I have some strategies on that section to help you kind of identify or not just identify, but kind of embrace who you are. Um, and then it may not be neurodivergent people. It may not be in
Yeah.
ADHD support groups. I mean, it could be, but it could
Mhm.
also be, you're into hiking or you're into music
You like
or
to cook.
whatever,
Yeah.
or you like cooking.
Yeah.
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 And you join a cooking class or a cooking meetup or dinner with strangers or one of those cool
Yeah.
things and just finding your people that way.
Mhm.
Because yeah. And especially as you get older, the loneliness thing is,
Mhm.
only worsened really because, either
So true.
you travel, you move. Like I grew up in Toronto and every time I go back, I see my best friends from childhood and we all get together and hang out and have a great time. Like but I've been here for 17 years, which is a fair amount of time still,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it's finding the others and building relationships and stuff everybody needs, regardless of whether you have a
Yeah.
significant other or not.
Super true.
Yeah.
Super true. And it's not even just the parents these days. This culture sort of got away from having a third space,
Mhm.
outside of the home and the work. We used to go to church. We used to go here, there. Now everything costs money. Now
Yeah.
not everybody can afford a third space.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
lack of third spaces just in general. I think with sprawling suburbs, it's harder to have accessible community spaces. And
Mhm.
even
I
for people
know.
that even if you have a car, like driving to a place, like that just seems like so many steps. Like I think a lot of people like if you lived in a more community like, structured living situation, you would naturally be having more opportunities to interact with people around you.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm,
Yeah.
you know, I spent a lot of time in bars in Toronto and going to see live music and
Yeah.
things. And, there's a couple local bars that we would hang out at. And it was like family. Like it was
Yeah.
just the best. And when I lived in Ireland and Scotland and the UK and England too, um, pub culture, pub life is the best because that is where people come together. I mean, pub means public house,
Yeah.
right? So you go and you sit around and you can go by yourself and meet strangers or hide your head in a book or whatever. And you meet people of all walks of life and it doesn't different religions, different politics, whatever, different interests, but I mean, you can have friends with opposing different views and things. And I think we're forgetting that in this day and age. And some examples are probably with good reason, but I
Yeah.
digress. And we don't have that in the States, right? Like
Mm.
in the States, depending where you live, I suppose, but in the States, a lot of the time, or it's frowned upon, like going to a bar.
Yeah.
Like, what are you, a drunk? Are you just going to pick people up or are you a jock and you're just going to watch games on big screens with
Right.
loud places? And for me, like a pub like a bar without a TV is the best thing in the world because
Mhm.
there's no
Some
distraction.
games. I think that it's a combination of one, having just Americans have a very different conceptualization of what a pub is because most people don't even put together like public house. Like it's just a place for people to
I didn't know
go,
that.
almost like
Yeah.
a kind of like a community center, but like not yet like similar. But
Yeah.
just the conceptualization, like if you ask someone, like, oh, like in America, like, what's a pub? They're going to think sports bar, I think is what's going to come into
Right.
their minds. I think
Yeah.
it's that. And I think that it's just
Restaurant.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 I think there's also just different understandings of or sorry, I think there's a different there's different activities that are normalized. Like I
Mhm.
think that it's not really super normalized to go into a place with the intention of like I'm going to go into this pub and just talk to new people and meet new people. Or if I
Yeah.
wanted to go by myself, like, and even sit and read a book, like you just said, I think some people would be like, is that weird? Should I not be doing this? Should I go with
Yeah.
friends? Are people going to think I'm
Amazing. Okay. How can people find you on the internet?
Yeah. Just
Any
drop.
like socials? Yeah.
Yeah. Drop by ysquirrels.com. That's where you can find me. I'm Dave Delaney on all the socials for the most part, or ysquirrels on different social networks. I'm trying to decide which ones to kill and which ones to keep going. In a strange way, I feel like if we're like all like, that's a terrible analogy. I'm trying to think of a better one, but the one that was coming to my head is like, I feel like if ADHDers are all, and they're not, to be clear, but let's just assume we're talking about AA, like alcoholics, let's say. It's like me saying, "Oh, come find me in a bar." You know what I mean? Like, it's like social media, like
Oh.
social networks are so crappy now. And
Doom-scrolling.
yeah, so yeah. So, but I'm on the socials for now, at least.
The last question is sort of going to be a fun one. Are you
Okay.
ready?
Oh yeah.
Basically, I've got these cards here.
Yeah.
They're from a company called We're Not Really Strangers. And
Okay.
it's basically just like a relationship building deck. As the
What
But yeah.
what question? Okay.
Um,
I love it.
I wish I had like cards that would do the nice shuffle, but I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, you can feel free to say pass on this one, but it says, what's something that you used to feel insecure about but don't anymore?
Used to feel insecure about and don't anymore. I guess probably sales. It's definitely like, it's not like, I'm not like, I used to say that I'm not a great salesperson. And then I realized I work for myself. And so
Yeah.
if I am not a good salesperson, then I'm in big trouble. And I realized that what I sell is ultimately, it's helping people, right? And or if it's with an audience, it's like you mentioned earlier, the words I use are enlighten them with new information, empower them by teaching them how to apply it and apply it and use it, and then entertain them by being my goofball self. Yeah, but my point to that is that if I'm selling something like a keynote or coaching or whatever, first of all, I'm not going to sell snake oil or BS somebody. If I can't help them, then I'll refer them to somebody else that can, if I know of somebody, but I'm not going to like, and so I can sleep at night in what I sell, and I see the results, and my clients have great feedback. And so I feel like it's my duty to sell my services because I'm doing the world better by doing so. So yeah, that's what I would say. What about you, Sarah?
Ooh, yikes. I mean, I can
Throwing
there
it
are so
back.
many. But I could very easily just agree with what you were saying. I used to be the kind of person who was like hiding in the shadows. I did not want to have the spotlight. I did one theater show in high school which was like huge and it felt really big for me, but then I immediately went right back in my shell, like never to come out again until
Right.
until through 2021 when I just randomly was like, yeah, let's be an ADHD coach.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Hey, Jay's back.
But
Sorry, that just like picked
That's
me.
okay.
But can you guys
No
hear?
problem.
that's okay.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
hear
we
you.
can
It's
now.
kind of quiet.
It's
Okay,
better.
but we can
sorry.
hear you.
I'm so sorry, Sarah. You were in the middle of being vulnerable and I just got kicked.
Yeah, no worries.
No, it's okay. I was just let's see. Yeah.
What was the
I wonder if I
question
should
about,
give
like,
any like real anything that is different though, because obviously we're all insecure about like coming out of our shell. Like we're all insecure about like
yeah,
putting our true selves out there and then being rejected for it. Nobody wants to create something only to have a bunch of people be like, ooh, nobody asked for this.
yeah.
So yeah, I feel like every single person who listens to this episode ever is going to relate to that sentiment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
What about
little
you, Jay? Were you? What was the question again? So you were
insecure about, but
insecure
not
about?
anymore.
Yeah.
Ooh. See, okay, because I definitely agree with that sentiment.
Yeah.
Actually, okay, it's kind of related, but I think like trusting my brain more.
Mm,
I think a lot of ADHDers, I think neurodivergent people, and also, I mean, anybody could really struggle with this, but if you are course corrected a lot for just something that's purely a difference instead of, it's like the wrong, like when there really isn't a right and wrong, I think it's really easy over time to not trust yourself. And I think for a while, and I'm definitely not perfect with it. And I think with a lot of support from some awesome people in my life, I've gotten some more confidence with it. But knowing that yeah, I can trust my brain to like with the decisions that I'm making and how I'm judging something, how I'm perceiving something. Like, I think that's something that I've definitely gotten a lot better with. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Yeah, thanks.
Everything else I'm thinking of is just very superficial. Like,
Well, the answer I was going to say was stand-up comedy, but
Yeah.
because I did like 6 open mics in 6 weeks, like 2 years ago for the first time.
Yeah.
And
was that a challenge?
Yeah.
no, it was just like
Oh.
I've done a ton of
Like a
improv. I
TikTok
mean, it was a
challenge?
challenge. I wasn't challenged to do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
But yes, it was a challenge. I've done like a lot of improv comedy over the years and studied with Second City in Toronto. So I know a lot of improv and I've taught it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it plays a part in some of the workshops I do for companies and things. But I always, and I've done storytelling nights and I've done obviously a lot of keynote presentations and workshops and things, but I'd never done stand up and I'm a big comedy fan. And so I was like, I've always wanted to do it. And so I finally just said, okay, screw it. I'm going to go do it. And so I did 6 open mics. But what I was going to say is that I'm not confident about it necessarily. Although, yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was great. I want to do it more, but it's, just not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, and this is such an overgeneralization, but there is like a saying where it's like artists and performers are either like delusionally confident or the most like insecure overthinkers, and I think a lot of people who perform share that same sentiment of just like it always can be better, nitpicking because you want it
Yeah.
to be the best that it can be. So you're
And
not alone.
And stand-up's especially difficult because I mean, unlike improv, like you're by yourself, but you've also prepared something presumably. But the difference, and I always found, I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Dave Chappelle or somebody else, but
Yeah.
talked about how, like as a musician, you practice your music with your bandmates, over and over and over again, playing in the basement, playing in the garage until you have songs written or your covers or whatever they are.
Yeah.
And you feel really confident that like, okay, this sounds great. Next stage then is to find a gig and go play in front of people. But at that point, and you don't know how it's going to go live because you could have technical issues or the audience could suck or whatever. But the thing is, at least you're well rehearsed enough to know that it sounds pretty good. Where with stand-up comedy, the only way to test the material is in front of an audience. There's no other way to test it.
Yeah.
And so it's like taking a guitar
Feels like
and
parenting.
kind of, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. It does sound like parenting in a way. Yeah. So
It's the kind of thing where, like, again, if you struggle with what I was
I
talking about
still don't know
before-
if I'm doing it right. Do you?
nobody does.
Okay.
Yeah. But like if you're already struggling with no, like struggling with like not being able to trust yourself, and that's going to be 10 times harder because I can only imagine. I mean, for both, I guess, parenting and comedy. So.
Yeah, and ADHDers, I know, like the statistic is something like we've heard like 10,000 negative things by the time we're 10 years old.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
That was. Oof. I feel like I was saying that to every person after I learned it. I was like, ooh, I need to tell every single ADHD person that they need to give themselves a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
You are too hard on yourself, my friend. Guaranteed. I don't know you, but I would be willing to bet money on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I know this is the ND report, but I don't know enough about autism to talk about autism. So I don't usually because I haven't learned enough about autism. And so that's why like I always reference ADHD as the thing, at least for me, because I do have a great understanding of that now.
Yeah,
Totally.
I'm pretty sure, and like Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of, I mean, it's great when we can talk about things that address ADHD and autism, but also there are going to be times where we're kind of more focused on ADHD and some episodes where we're more focused on autism, and just any knowledge in general and anything neurodivergent is going to be helpful, I think, to the people that are listening, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also about like highlighting the individual stories of the neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
I think it's really important, especially right now with everything that's going on. I feel like if we can just take all of the different kinds of people and all of the different like communication styles, put it together in one podcast, and then we're just like, we have a place to live forever, guys.
I love
A
it.
video
I love it.
like diary.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, really honored.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dave.
Well,
Cool.
yeah.
We'll keep talking. I'm sure you guys have a great weekend, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See ya.
Awesome. See you next
All right.
time.
Cheers.
Thanks for being here. If you want to connect with the Neurodivergent Report, you can find us at ND Report Pod on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, Substack, etc.
If you're looking to support the show, the best thing you can do is subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Please do that.
And hey, if you want to check out more about us, visit our website at ndreportpod.com. And you can also go there if you want to be a guest contributor on the show.
Until next time, be well, do good.